winning, and we are going to win. The long arc of history favors LGBTQ equality, and the next generation is overwhelmingly LGBTQ inclusive. So history is on our side, and our equality is not a question of if, it is a question of when.
Hey, Grio fam, I'm Jaron Keith Gaynor, managing editor of politics and Washington correspondent at The Grio, and I am here with U.S. Congressman Richie Torres. Congressman Torres, welcome to The Grio. It's a pleasure to have you again.
It's an honor to be here.
First, happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride.
And I know that the last time we spoke, it actually was Pride, and we talked about you being a history maker, being sworn in as the first openly gay Afro-Latino elected to the U.S. Congress. And you've now been legislating for now more than a year. How has your first term been? And what are you reflecting on this Pride Month?
Look, it's been an unusually eventful term in Congress. If someone had said to me a few years ago that I would become a member of Congress during an infectious disease outbreak and witness an insurrection against the U.S. Capitol and vote to impeach an outgoing president who had been impeached once before, and all of that would happen within the first 2 weeks, I would have said that sounds more like a movie than real life. So it's been unusually eventful, but it's an honor to be in the United States Congress, where I can do an enormous amount of good for an enormous number of people. And we're at a critical time in our nation when our very democracy is at stake. For me, January 6th was not simply an assault on a physical structure, it was an assault on the very idea of America as a multiracial, multi-ethnic, LGBTQ inclusive democracy. So it's never been more important to be on the front lines of fighting extremism in America. For me, Pride is partly a celebration of how far we've come. We stand on the shoulders of giants who paved the way so that people like me could become a member of Congress, and so that all of us can have the freedom to live our lives without fear of violence, without fear of rejection. So we've made progress and we should celebrate it, but it also should be a call to action. That we have to be careful not to become complacent, not to prematurely declare mission accomplished, because there continue to be regressive right-wing forces that want to undo the progress that we've achieved. And so the LGBTQ community has to be vigilant. And the purpose of Pride is to drive home the message that we're here, we're queer, and we ain't going anywhere. And we're going to keep fighting for our equality.
The Biden-Harris administration is celebrating Pride Month at the White House this week. And the White House has seen really unprecedented appointments, including White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre, Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, as well as Rachel Levine, the highest ranking trans government official as an assistant secretary in the Department of Health and Human Services. As someone who understands very personally the impact of visibility and the power of having a seat at the table, how important are these appointments in the administration in terms of what they represent, but also in advancing policy that impacts LGBTQ plus people?
It's important for people, especially LGBTQ youth, especially LGBTQ youth of color, especially LGBTQ youth of trans experience. It's important for people to see themselves in their elected leadership at every level of government. It is powerful to have openly LGBTQ representation at the highest levels of the federal government. Not only is it inspiring, it can also be life-saving because it expands the realm of what is possible. It empowers people to dream big and to dream boldly.
And as you know, there are hundreds of anti-LGBTQ plus bills being passed and proposed across the country, in particular states like Florida and Texas. And I know what it felt like to be a young Black queer boy going through the journey of my identity. I cannot imagine this generation of young people who are on that same journey, but then also being politicized and targeted by these bills. What do you make of this moment?
The moment that we live in is reminiscent of 2004, when I was in high school, when I was beginning to come to terms with my sexuality. In 2004, George Bush and the Republican Party ran on a platform of opposing marriage equality in a whole host of states, right? It was part of their strategy. And I feel like the Republican Party is embracing a reformulation of the same strategy, that it is waging the same kind of culture war that it did in 2004. The difference between then and now is that there's a particular focus on the trans community. The Republican Party is waging a relentless and ruthless campaign of fear mongering and scapegoating, specifically targeting the trans community. And we've seen it manifest itself mostly at the level of state legislatures. We've seen a whole host of bathroom bills and sports bills.
But how important is the Equality Act in protecting the LGBTQ plus community from discrimination? And how can the White House aid Congress in this fight to pass the Equality Act?
When it comes to the equality of the LGBTQ community, the Equality Act is the holy grail. The Equality Act would expand the scope of the Civil Rights Act to include the LGBTQ community. It would protect the LGBTQ community from discrimination in matters of employment, housing, and public accommodation, right? It's based on the proposition that no one should be fired or evicted or denied critical services or accommodations simply because of who you are or whom you love. Despite the progress that we've made as a society, despite LGBTQ representation in media and government, despite Obergefell versus Hodges, it continues to be the case that in the majority of states in America, you can be fired or evicted because of your sexual orientation and gender identity. And that is why the Equality Act is more important than ever, because not everyone lives in a state that is pro-LGBTQ.
I know we talked about a lot of the doom and gloom of the community and what the community faces, but what is your message of hope to the community this Pride Month?
My message of hope is we're winning, and we are going to win. The long arc of history favors LGBTQ equality, and the next generation is overwhelmingly LGBTQ inclusive. So history is on our side, and our equality is not a question of if, it is a question of when, but we should never take it for granted. We have to keep fighting, and we have to assert our pride. And you know, we in the LGBTQ community, we're radical simply by virtue of being who we are. Like, you know, to be LGBTQ is to be a challenge to the status quo. It's to be a challenge to the traditional categories and binaries that have dominated our society. So we should just embrace the radicalism of who we are and what our society has become.